How do we build Africa's digital future intelligently? What is the ask to build an ultra-modern and futuristic Pan-African ecosystem that may just rival Wakanda's? And who is tasked to carry out this mission? Offering high-speed connectivity, state-of-the-art data centers, and innovative digital solutions. For this special edition of Africa Tech Week, we are in conversation with Liquid Intelligent Technologies. Over the last 20 years, the company has firmly established itself as the leading Pan-African infrastructure provider across 13 countries, primarily in Eastern, Central, and Southern Africa, serving mobile operators, carriers, enterprise, media, and content companies, as well as retail customers with high-speed, reliable connectivity, hosting and co-location, and digital services. It has also built Africa's largest independent fiber network, spanning more than 70,000 kilometers and operating data centers in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Nairobi. For this session, not only are we tasked with engaging how the company is building Africa's digital future, but how Africa's digital future increasingly belongs to the cloud and extension of connectivity beyond smartphones and computers, and what it will take for managed network solutions to grow world-class businesses out of Africa and protect users and business-critical data. Joining us from Liquid Intelligent Technologies South Africa is Dion Geyser, the Chief Executive Officer. Prior to joining LTSA and in his 18-year career, he's held senior management positions at Siemens and Millicom International Cellular, Tigo for short, and his most recent position being that of Head of Southern Africa and Vodafone Africa for Nokia since 2014. We also welcome to the conversation Sandile Nzele, the Chief Financial Officer. Sandile is a chartered accountant in South Africa and a member of SAICA, the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. In a career spanning over 20 years, he's worked in the Middle East and African markets with various senior positions at the MTN Group across Cameroon, Zambia, South Africa, and Nigeria, to mention a few. To round off our panel, we're joined by Boyd Chislett, the Chief Business Officer. Boyd brings in global market experience within the telecoms and satellite industry at a director, executive, and operational management level, with core strengths relating to managing large, multiple geography, diverse teams, channels, as well as partnerships. There's also experience and track record within turnaround and growth businesses, as well as looking closely with various BODs across listed and non-listed entities. Gentlemen, we thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this conversation. And I suppose to open the floor and invite some opening remarks, I want us to look at the building blocks of an intelligent digital Africa. And this speaking to how your role and your department, as well as your team, supports the mission that is of Liquid Intelligent Technologies and how you engage with this mission. Dion, let's start with you.
Vuyo, thank you very much, and thank you for welcoming our team to the Africa Tech Week. It's great to be part of the program. I think very interesting startup question, right, is how do we build a future digital Africa? And, as an engineer who started from engineering into IT and into business management, I think one of the key things that's intrigued me quite a lot since the start of my journey in telecom space is what can technology bring to the continent? I was very fortunate growing up in a multinational organization, and I quite remember my first business trips into Europe and into the developed part of the world, and looking at what technology is doing in the first world countries, and then seeing, but what can we do with those technologies back in Africa? And if you look at the heart of what we're doing in liquid intelligent technologies, and as you mentioned, 17-year history we have had. I mean, liquid intelligent or liquid started really in 2004, and today we're operating in 15 countries. We have more than 70,000 kilometers of own built fiber. Very soon we will be passing 100,000 kilometers of our own fiber assets across the continent, connecting Cairo right through to Cape Town. And in South Africa, we're having more than 22,000 kilometers of fiber. And I think to your question, but what is the future digital Africa look like? I believe we in Africa will decide that future for ourselves. And that's what I believe is the future success of Liquid. Our businesses across these 15 countries, we are operating in our countries with the local regulatory, with the local challenges that the market requires. And what we need for our small, medium businesses, our enterprise businesses, is driven around the fact that we actually take some of the great lessons learned out of first world countries, we homegrown that, and we actually bring them to the local market. And I think what is really important for us as a business as well, is the fact that we need a strong talent density for us, the business, to actually grow that. And that's why I'm very happy to also be joined on the call today with two of my colleagues, Sandile and Boyd, who also recently joined our Exco team, because we firmly believe in growing top local capability and using that capability with fostering capability with bringing solutions into South Africa, into different countries that we operate in, and forcing that into the segments that we're focusing on.
Absolutely. And I think to your point in mentioning the team that you work with as well, Sandile and Boyd, I'm going to throw this question to you two as well, in terms of in your role and how the relativity of these building blocks that Dion is mentioning to building this intelligent digital Africa. How do you engage with this mission? Sandile, let's pass it over to you.
Thanks very much, Vuyo, and thanks for allowing us to participate in Africa Week. It is quite an excitement for us. And just to answer your question specifically, and I'm going to build a little bit on what Dion has spoken about. And that is, our mission is about connecting Africa digitally. But it's not just about connecting Africa digitally, but it is about solving the challenges of Africa. And therefore, it becomes very important that we work with, let's call it, the organizations, be it public sector or private sector, and the larger populace of Africa to try and solve the underlying problems that they have. Because I can provide you with connectivity, I can provide you with digitization, but if I'm not really solving what you are trying to solve, it is as good as if I'm just providing with a solution that doesn't help you. And therefore, our part of it is to partner with our customers and partner with our business partners to try and solve the overall challenges of Africa. And it is really how, as an organization, we position ourselves. As I said, it could be a public sector, it could be a private sector, it could be populace. And inside all of those, if you just take the private sector component, you would break it down into its own segments. There are large businesses, there are small businesses, and there are medium-sized businesses. And they all have different needs and they all have different requirements. Now, you can just stretch it forward a little bit and just have a look and look on what has happened with COVID-19. A lot of us talk about work from home, but work from home requires that digital services or digital solutions are provided to people that are working from home. Underneath all of that, it is supported by connectivity. And that connectivity is exactly what Dion has spoken about. We've got over 70,000 kilometers of fiber infrastructure in the continent, and quite a bit of that sits within the South African space. So when we go about with our teams, let's call it at an organizational level, together with at a departmental level, that is, let's call it the vision and the strategy that we instill in our teams. That is the vision and the strategy that we say to our teams. That is what we are working towards. But as I say, at the bottom of it, we are trying to solve the problems and the challenges and the opportunities that our customers are looking for.
Absolutely, and I think your point around the multi-stakeholder engagement this week is definitely about calling all these stakeholders to task, from the private to the public sector, but also civil society. And how they are engaging and need this infrastructure, to your point, to work remotely at home. Boyd, I'm going to bring you into this as well in your role as Chief Business Officer and how it supports Liquid Intelligent Technologies to essentially drive its mission ahead.
Thanks, Vuyo. And again, not to repeat my colleagues, thanks for having us at these important conferences. It's very different doing it virtually. We used to networking with people and shaking hands, etc. But thank you for having us. Sandile touched on an important point, and that is about mission. And I'm not talking about a corporate mission where we sit in a boardroom and we plot where an organization needs to transition to over a period of time. It's a mission that I look at a greater African context. You know, the mission is one part of what we do, and solving problems and solutions to problems is the other part, and they have to coexist. And so I couldn't agree with Sandile more. It's really important that we don't only look at it through a myopic, we're a business, we provide connectivity, we need to partner. And to carry on that, for us, our business is structured into three key channel environments. We have an enterprise business, we have a small, medium enterprise business, and then we have a partnership business. Notwithstanding that, I think what's really important is that in everything we do, we partner with local knowledge. Having worked in many distribution environments throughout Africa, and most recently based in the Middle East, looking after African assets, the one thing that always struck me was that why did businesses fail in Africa? Why do they fail in certain markets? And for me, there's one simple thing. It's because they don't have a local knowledge of how the market operates. They don't recruit local people. They don't look to partner with local entities that understand these markets. And for us as Liquid, as you mentioned, from the assets we have across the continent, the countries that we have pervasive infrastructure on, this is all done with local assets. We are an international organization, but most certainly we partner locally. And for me, that is the success of any business operating in the African continent. And that's why African businesses need to be investing heavily in local distribution, local partnerships, local people, local teams, and local infrastructure providers. So as part of our strategy as we grow this business, not just in South Africa, but in sub-Saharan Africa, is to ensure that we continually invest. And it does two things. It upholds the mission of being an African company here in South Africa that is providing connectivity to solve the challenges of everyday problems. And then the second is we have a product environment that does that. But for me, working locally is probably the most critical element working in Africa.
Absolutely. And we're going to bring it back later on, Boyd, to another component of local assets that definitely ensure the success of any company to thrive. Dion, I'm going to pass it back to you. And when we speak to the theme of transformation, that's been consistent globally with the mark of the pandemic. This has been consistent as well for Liquid. The group recently repositioned and rebranded as part of its new strategic direction to transform from being a telco into a multifaceted digital organization that provides emerging services and solutions across the African continent. Speak to us about this decision, the investments that have been employed to carry out this decision, as well as the added capabilities that the company can now engage in.
Thank you, Vuyo. I think good question, and I'll summarize it with a couple of key aspects, but it's important with that answer to also give you some context to Liquid as a group. I think it's important to note that if you look at Liquid the middle of last year, it's always been an ambition of our chairman, our shareholders, and the group executive team to transform the company from a pure connectivity play to actually adding more value-added services on top of the fiber assets and the spectrum assets that we have. And what was quite clear at the start of the pandemic was that COVID was bringing together with all the health-related issues, a fundamental digital transformation that every business had to grapple with. Our view at the time was that, all companies are taking short-term decisions about how to get people working remote or working from home or working from anywhere. But that will drive, in the medium term, a transformation of how life will be post-COVID. And as a business, our executive team took a decision to fast-track our own transformation to get us to that point that we can actually leverage the opportunities that will come from the post-COVID world. And what that meant for us, if you look at the business, is that Liquid today is made up of the fiber assets, which is the traditional Liquid Telecoms business. We have a large VSAT business across the continent. We have an undersea business which holds all our undersea assets of all the undersea cables connecting the different countries around the continent. And then we have a technologies business. And what was quite clear during the COVID pandemic is that our cloud services business, for example, grew 4x, actually closer to 5x in South Africa specifically and across the group. And if you mix that together with our last part of our business, our Africa data centers, it's quite clear that with the arrival of COVID mixed with the arrival of the large cloud players, the world going forward will not look the same from a applications, connectivity, as well as solving, business questions. And we had to transform ourselves in order to take the opportunity that will bring. Now, what does it mean for us in South Africa? In South Africa, we've done quite a large transformation the last 9 months, of which the rebrand recently is only sort of the stick on the outside while we've been changing the inside, if I can put it that way. But on the inside, we've done a large transformation with really strengthening our products and sales teams with an understanding of, as Sandile and Boyd have mentioned, of partnering with our customers and understanding, well, what does a digital transformation hold for you, our enterprise, small, medium enterprise, public sector, wholesale customers even? And how do we take our assets, which we've integrated into cloud services? For example, our voice platforms, we've integrated into Business Teams Voice. We have a large security portfolio, cloud services portfolio, and managed network services. How do we take that and I almost want to say customize that for our specific enterprise customers or whichever segment that requires? A big chunk of our business already in South Africa had a part of these services. And the key thing is how do we fast track the growth of those services? To be quite frank, I'm really proud of what the team has been able to do the last 9 months, because running a transformation journey like that during the pandemic and getting to where we are at today, with having fantastic engagement with our customers and getting the organization very positive and motivated for the year ahead, because we just started our financial year. I'm really proud of what the team has been able to do during this short 9-month period. And we are in context, we had to go into the market and we really strengthened our sales organization with capable people coming from a traditional SI mindset, because typically what we've done is we've added on top of our connectivity business a bit of an SI mindset of saying, hey, where's our customers going to and what do I need to offer in order to solve the problem of today for that specific customer and for that segment? And how do we customize the solutions a lot quicker and put products to market a lot quicker? And therefore we've productized now solutions beyond our voice, connectivity, security, and cloud businesses, also with adding working from home as a solution. Our cloud services business and our hosting services, we have the capability of tailoring that for our specific customers. And not only in South Africa, the other part of the transformation was being able to do that homogeneously across the continent. And that is a big aspect of this whole, what we define AI, African intelligence, is being able to bring, solutions for Africa into Africa, and rolling that out seamlessly for a number of our multinational customers as well. And then I think lastly, we're on top of selling it, it's also about being able to deliver and support those. And, in big, that's what we've been doing. And as I mentioned, the team has done an excellent job at executing on that.
Thinking long-term, accelerating the top and bottom line, as well as the fascinating growth and perhaps the expected growth of the cloud and how it has grown for the past few years. And I think the investment in the data centers across the multiple
is unmatched in the continent. And therefore, the building blocks, as far as I'm concerned, are already there. And we are going to continue to invest in that infrastructure because the needs are going to continue. The second layer to that is the fact that, I always say that fixed connectivity is the new mobile, is the new mobility. And then attached to that is then the convergence of all of the solutions coming back into one. But fundamentally, you need a very strong connectivity layer that enables you to add on all of these other services on top of that. Now, for instance, Dion has already spoken about the data center services that we are offering. But the moment you offer data center services, it almost pushes you over to, inverted commas, what I will call cloud. Because the moment you've got that infrastructure, all of a sudden you've got an entity that says, I don't want to have on-premise IT equipment. I can actually go and host this equipment onto that data center that is already there. But in order for that connectivity, for that IT infrastructure to work, you need connectivity, which again, I'm saying we already have. But on top of that, you then have got customers that are going to say, okay, well, I'm taking all my life, I'm handing them over to you. How sure am I that actually there is proper security, that no one can access my data, can access my information? And a lot of fraudulent activity that are taking place today is because of identity fraud. So not only are we providing, let's call it the bottom layer, which is the connectivity layer, we're also providing, let's call it cloud services. And in addition to that, we're providing customers with security that actually enables them to go to sleep at night. But as I say, to us, those are just basic building blocks that we are seeing in the next 2 to 3 years. There is going to be all sorts of other services and solutions that are going to come to stream. Financial services are becoming mobility. There are countries today, if you take China as an example, like China are starting to remove ATMs because banking services have really become mobile. So that is the future, if I can put it that way, that we are seeing for ourselves further down the line. But what that requires is that we have got the right infrastructure, we've got the right building blocks that will enable us to compete further down the line. The last point I would like to make on this is that Liquidity is very well positioned. When you really look at the assets that we have, there are some entities that don't have the assets that we have. We have got assets that enable mobility, and that is spectrum assets. We have got assets that enable connectivity, which is the fixed line assets. There are some entities who do not have that. So we are right in the middle of everyone else that has got a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And therefore, our ability in delivering on the promise that we are putting on the table, I think it is very, very possible. It is right there in terms of us delivering on that promise.
Absolutely. And I think to the mention of these assets and being well positioned, Boyd, I'm going to come to you. And earlier on, I think you successfully painted this picture of the clinical development that has taken place through the partnerships and relationships. But another component of this, the local assets that we had mentioned earlier on, is the staff at Liquid, as well as the culture at Liquid, that has been quite integral to this transformation. Can you briefly walk us through the framework of support and engagement that has had to be employed for this repositioning to be rolled out successfully?
Thanks for your, sure. I can tell you now that managing a change process in any small, medium, or large organization, one of the toughest tasks is not selling the change to your stakeholders and customers, but actually ensuring that the most critical asset that you have in the business, your people, that they're supporting this strategy of a fundamental business change. And it's a long process. It goes right down to engagement on a daily basis with people, having the right conversations with people. But more importantly for me, it's about us as leaders behaving with a value system that articulates what it is we want to achieve as an organization and portraying that every single day. We need to be living, breathing, eating, and sleeping the value system that we want an organization to portray. And that requires us to lead by example. So making certain that when we need to be in front of the tough customers, we're front and center supporting our people. When there are challenging tasks and work to be done late at night, we're there with our teams front and center, making certain. So leading by example is a critical part of any change strategy in any organization. And a lot of people forget this and they leave the staff behind. And the executive committee often runs far ahead with these great ideas and these great strategies, and we get excited about them. But when a call arrives in a contact center or it goes into a level 1 call and the staff member is not part of that journey, the most wonderful plans fail. So the liquid engagement model has most certainly been that. It's been Dion from a South Africa perspective has led this front and center, also supported by our CEO based in London, as well as our group chief operating officer also based in London. So the entire leadership team has backed the turnaround in terms of positioning this organization. The other trick also is making certain that our customers are front and center, understanding these capabilities. Because it's all good and well us internally looking at our capabilities, and it's the world's best kept secret. So a lot of time spent in front of customers, really taking them through this journey of an infrastructure provider to what I call a fully integrated ICT solution provider for the future. In other words, no matter what solution our customers are looking for in the ICT space, if it's about enablement, we must be seen as their trusted advisor, and we must be front and center. And to do that, we have to have an organization that is well enabled. So for me, it's about the value system, leading by examples, and also holding the organization accountable. Some people are going to resist change. They are comfortable with the status quo. And as leaders, it requires us to sometimes make challenging decisions by making certain that we have the right people in the organization. But I must tell you, I've been in the business for a very short space of time, and I've been absolutely amazed by the energy within the team, the commitment by the team. When I walk the corridors, right down to people on the telephone, to our account managers, to the executives, and an absolute commitment to this journey. And I think that is as a result of a world-class engagement with the organization.
Absolutely. And I think to your point around leaving no one behind, it's not just externally that we want to achieve that, but definitely the internal mechanisms in the heart of these operations is something that we want to take the employees of Liquid along this journey with. Dion, I'm going to go back to you on this, and I think Boyd briefly touched on this as well. But the idea of productizing enterprise has become an innate response strategy in how technology companies and the solutions that are created have been engaged throughout the pandemic. And how has the business strategically engaged with the various multi-stakeholders and customers that are needed to build this idea of this recurring term of intelligent digital Africa? And if you can share with us some of these wins and challenges in executing this engagement.
I think it's it's an interesting discussion, because if you sit with thousands of enterprise customers, right? Each of these enterprise customers, you need to understand their unique business. So one of the key things we had to do throughout the transformation is to do a very detailed segmentation of our customer base, and added on top of that a proper and solid understanding of the segment and that specific customer that we deal with. And that's been one of the key learnings we've taken through this transformation, and one of the key enablers we've taken through this whole journey is to actually enable our front end, our sales teams, with a mindset of saying, but hey, if you are that customer, what's happening in your business, and how do I actually work on a solution for you, dear Mr. Customer? And if you look at it specifically on our different segments, right? I mean, the banks, for example, they're currently sitting in an environment where they're sitting thousands of people working from home with a question, but what do I do with my ATMs? What's the future of an ATM look like? What does the future of my branches look like? Will I need a branch? Or how do I use that retail space which I've signed up for? Is my solution for rural connectivity the right solution with all the potential power outages the country will still be facing with load shedding, or should I potentially even move back to satellite? With the transformation into cloud, how do I do that cloud transformation journey? You know, as Liquid, we recently bought over the Standard Bank data center in Midrand, and we firmly believe that that data center is going to be a mega data center for financial services, moving towards that, over time. And therefore, actually, if you look at that segment specifically, we've launched our working from home product, which deals with how do I move staff, to home. How do I deal with voice services? Integrate that into Teams Business Voice, that you don't have to go to another application. You have another data set of cost, or you have another voice cost, that you integrate that into a single bill fee, and that you integrate that seamlessly into your product offering. And then our engagement with the banks is beyond just that. It's also going into what is the future of the data center, what is the future of managed network services for you, what is a bank, what is the ATM, all of that, and how does that look like not only in South Africa but in the continent, right? So really an exciting journey with them. And then if you jump to the retailers, we've had interesting dialogues with a number of the retailers with considering but future technology requirements as well as the connectivity requirements look like. I think there were, for a period of time, the first phase of the pandemic, there were a lot of concerns, but, how will the retailers actually be able to recover initially from COVID, right? Because they're very fee dependent. And how do some of the guys actually move online, and how do they use technology like AI, for example, to actually mirror but what's happening in their purchasing spend? And how do we use software applications for security, connecting their point of sales, connecting, services seamlessly? And then if you jump to, and I'd like to call out two specific use cases, Vuyo. We have a customer, ENS. It's a law firm, and recently, throughout their branches throughout Africa, they had a requirement of saying exactly what we've just been talking about. They have these locations all over the continent. They were looking for a partner that can offer, home engineer services across the continent and integrate voice services into Business Teams Voice to not have a ballooning of cost while these guys are phoning cross-continent and cross-country, right, which is inflating their integrated cost. We've offered them now a solution, and we're busy implementing that, whereby we're taking over all their voice services across the continent, integrated that into Business Teams Voice, with actually reduction in their overall spend. So it really, to come back to the point, each segment, what we see requires a specific, unique way of thinking. However, what we do see across the spectrum of enterprise customers is a need of saying, well, how do we manage ballooning of costs? Okay. How do I manage my people working from anywhere? How do I do that securely? And how do I manage cloud transformation? And can we take over those services and move the data centers and the equipment to the cloud services and do that securely? And how do I trust one single partner to take care of all of it? And that is where we have a number of our customers that is actually, coming to us and requiring us to actually support them in that journey. I'd like to call out the second one, Vuyo, which for us has been really interesting. We've recently been awarded the SANRAL wide area network build out. So with our large fiber network, actually that project is a typical SI project that we've been awarded now in February, whereby we will be building the IP network for SANRAL, that hosts all the toll roads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We will be building out that network and then managing that for a period of time and integrating that into our fiber assets. Now that competitors in that deal was not the traditional operators, it's a traditional SIs, and very happy with the great work the team has been able to do. With another public sector customer, for example, Eskom, we're doing a lot of security work with Eskom, for example, about how do they secure communications for them. how do we actually manage their security requirements? As Sandile has mentioned, at least what we see with this increase in cloud services is a significant increase in security breaches. And to be quite frank, I believe in South Africa in general, our people are still a little bit uneducated to the phenomenal risk that brings to each and every business, whether that be in supply chain, banking transactions, change of bank accounts, hacking, and just basic fraud, all brought about just by pure identity theft and other means. And how do you actually not only manage that people don't get into your servers, but just manage that your communication, even though you think you're communicating to the right person, is actually the right person. That's why I'm actually quite happy that the examples which I've mentioned to you is touching on a number of the different services that we have been able to actually not only be awarded, but start to build out over the recent months.
Absolutely. And I think it's quite apparent to that, Dion. So thank you so much for engaging on that. And Sandile, I suppose to connect to Dion's response in also your mention around ICT for enablement, creating shared value, and the future of banking being digital, with a stream of emerging digital banks coming through, especially in South Africa. And I might be giving you the sharp edge of the sword with this question. But in driving profitability and enabling future sustainable growth and enhancing this shared value for your stakeholders, what is the next phase of strategy for Liquid South Africa?
So let me start by saying that I think your precursor to the question is about creating shareholder value. And to me, that is the output of everything else that we do. That is the outcome of everything else that we do. And how does that really come about? It really comes about with how we put together our products. What exactly do they solve from a customer perspective? How do we look after our own customers, which touches on customer service? It also talks to how do we invest for the future. Now, if I can just touch a little bit, let's call it on the product sets. I think those are very clear to us in terms of what is it that we want to offer to the customers. But I think the key thing there is for us to start cross-selling to those customers, that we do not look at a customer from a linear perspective, but we look at a customer from a vertical and a horizontal perspective. So if, for instance, you as a customer come to us and you only want connectivity, there is a whole suite of products that we can actually sell you and say that in addition to that, we can actually offer you these services even cheaper than someone else. That is the first part. That is in a very localized environment. If you take it one level higher, we are an African player. If, as an example, a Standard Bank comes and talks to us about connectivity, we shouldn't be looking at Standard Bank from a South African perspective, but we should be looking at Standard Bank from an overall continent perspective, because they most probably are operating in markets in which we are in. And in some instances, in the markets where we are not in, we can actually partner with other players that are sitting in those markets. So predominantly, we've got the product set on the one hand, we have got the customer set on the other hand, but the question is, how do we expand the product offering and how do we expand the cross-selling to those customers? And that creates a lot of operating leverage as far as us generating additional revenues in that space. And obviously, shareholder value gets created by us generating more revenue, looking after our customers and creating a long-term tenure with those customers such that they trust us and they actually start asking us for other things that we may not actually be thinking about at this point, because we learn internally, we learn externally as well. And I think the second part to it is we are always going to be chasing us providing these services as efficiently and cost-effective as possible. And we are going to always be looking at the overall cost of serving those customers. We're going to be always looking at the infrastructure cost or the capital cost that we have to invest in order to provide those services to those customers. So we're going to be looking, and we'll continue to, we're going to be looking at growing the revenues at the top. We're going to be looking at efficiently running the operation in such a way that we extract the cost out of the organization. Net, all of that results in good profitability, good cash flows, and ultimately the shareholders then get the return that they are looking for from the business.
Absolutely. And I think to Boyd's point around creating this value system that essentially enables the business to thrive and meet not only the bottom line, but the triple bottom line, right? Which is about creating this sustainable development and enabling advancement and transformation across the continent. Boyd, we want to build and see an Africa that is homogeneously thriving, but I think we also recognize that not only the danger of telling a single story, but that it needs to emphatically grow beyond USSD and smartphone capabilities. What has been Liquid's response to serving Africa innovatively in its various markets? And I think also adjacent to the urgent call for innovation and action that has been brought by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thanks, Vuyo. Yeah, I think the COVID-19 pandemic has most certainly accelerated organizations' strategies to create a digital transformation roadmap within their business. So if you look at any industry, whether you're a bank, with anyone that consumes real estate, whether you have lots of branches, many offices around the country and around the continent, one was always aware that having this heavy burden of infrastructure was a historical burden that you've inherited and created, but it's quite hard to extract yourself out of it. So a lot of organizations historically delayed their digital migration and their digital transformation processes because you were stuck with this heavy investment of real estate and capex that was sitting on your balance sheet. And here you get these guys coming to you to say, hey, we think that you should be digitally transforming your business into something that is going to be sustainable into the future. Sandile, as a CFO who I've sat across and worked with for many years, he would battle to support that when you're sitting on this infrastructure, and rightly so. What the pandemic has done has really sped up this digitalization of organizations in our world, where people are forced to work from home, unfortunately shut down certain elements of real estate, and that's seeing huge impacts on other industries. For us, what's positive about that is that organizations now are trying to find fundamentally different ways of doing the same business they did, but at a more effective mechanism, lower cost, etc. So, I mean, Dion spoke about a couple of business cases, etc. We've also recently in Africa, Coca-Cola, who we know is one of the biggest bottlers on the continent. Some people would dispute that. They operate within 13 different countries. I think they've got 16,000 people that work for them across the continent. And they were faced with the same challenge, is how do I start migrating my business into digital transformation that is leading edge, that's going to allow me to survive into the future. So the pandemic certainly helped us accelerate that. But it did something else for us. It got us thinking as an organization, saying, well, whilst you have digital migration that starts moving people's infrastructure off premise into the cloud, suddenly a multitude of other problems and solutions started arising. And Dion spoke around security. So security and cybersecurity is a huge challenge for an organization's digital migration strategy. And that means then that you have a technology response where you have to be really clear about the type of technology you deploy, how you start managing that technology on a daily basis, how you do your backups, etc. But then there's an adjacency that there's a people strategy that says, hey, majority of security breaches don't come from technology, they actually come from people. So that then creates another adjacent level of industry value-added services. As you start moving further into the technology value chain, what's starting to come out of a digitalized strategy is the Internet of Things. Now, Internet of Things, machine to machine, as I used to call it, it's been around for decades. People tracking their motor vehicle, tracking a high-value asset. But now what we're seeing is this fundamental shift with 5G and the critical spectrum assets that we sit upon. Suddenly, the Internet of Things, IoT, becomes another valuable industry that we are seeing mushrooming throughout the continent. So this talks about healthcare. Suddenly, you are wanting to monitor large hospitals across Africa, clinics, etc. So through the pandemic, A lot of organizations through their charitable environments have assisted clinics, schools to function through the pandemic. But suddenly, the Internet of Things allows you to provide solutions to patients like pacemaker monitoring, to give someone a high alert that you don't have to come into the doctor or the hospital unless you have an incident. Looking at tracking assets, security within Africa. So we're starting to see a significantly mushrooming adjacent industry coming out of digitalization. And interestingly, because of the assets that we have deployed in Africa and the connectivity we have through our fiber network, our metro fiber, our satellite relationships, etc., we're finding that we're front and center of these conversations with these transformation customers. And I think that's only the beginning. We don't know what's coming around the corner in terms of challenges and new solutions. But for us, number one is we have the network, but number two, we have these blue chip organizations that when they have these problems, they need to be knocking on our door first, not through our competitors.
Absolutely, and hopefully through Africa Tech Week, we get to engage a lot more of those stakeholders. Now, the transformation has taken place, and as we wrap up, we've engaged on the top and bottom lines and the work and the strategic conversations and partnerships that still continue. As we wrap up with our closing remarks and inviting you to take this forth, I'd like you to first finish this sentence and then add on to how you close in terms of building this intelligent Africa, this future digital Africa that we all want to see come through. So Boyd, I'll go back to you and I'll ask you to finish the sentence and then insert your closing remarks, and that is to build and grow world-class digital businesses of scale out of Africa. What needs to happen?
We have to close the Africa perception gap, invest locally, and ensure that we successfully distribute locally.
I love that. I love that very much. Sandile, to build and grow world-class digital businesses of Africa, of scale out of Africa, what needs to happen?
For me, it's a couple of things. We have to invest in infrastructure. We need to think globally and act locally because we're trying to solve local problems. We need to continue to be innovative. We need to employ experienced personnel and experienced leadership such that we can provide those services. And lastly, we need to think customer all the time because that is really what we're trying to resolve. We are trying to resolve the challenges that customers are having, and therefore we need to put the customer right at the center of everything that we do.
Absolutely. Customer centricity and how we innovate and where we invest will definitely play a role in that. Dion, let's wrap this with you. To build and grow world-class digital businesses of scale out of Africa, complete.
I believe we need to build the African future. And as we said at the start, the digital connected future Africa. And we need to build this vision of what does it mean for us in the future medium term, and then take our customers and our employees there.
Short and sweet and to the point. Well, a liquid conversation on Africa's digital tech future with solid impact and incoming innovations coming to task of the call of how do we build Africa's digital future intelligently, as well as mapping the strategic stakeholders that will be responsible for seeing this through. A huge thank you to our panelists for joining us and sharing the design, the decisions that have to be taken in delivering this said future with Liquid Intelligent Technologies mission across Africa.